Everybody doing all right? Have a good weekend? I'll take that as a no. Yeah, go ahead. All righty. On Friday, we were talking about the causes of World War I, and we said that there was, intense nationalism, colonialism. The third thing were military alliances that were being formed. There were two basic camps, and I think they're already in your notes. The Central Powers, which are Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, which is what we call Turkey today, modern-day Turkey. And then the Allies, or Triple Entente, are Great Britain, France, and Russia. Who's missing? Why? 1917, before the United States enters into the war. And by that time, Russia has actually left. And we'll see something about that in a little while. But then you have some smaller countries, Belgium, Serbia, and some others as well. But Serbia becomes an important player in all of this mess that is about to happen in Europe and eventually in the war, or in the world, calling it a world war. So the Allied powers, Serbia, Belgium, France, Great Britain, Russia, Japan, and Montenegro are the principal players there. And then, going backwards. Mean to. And then you have Austria-Hungary with Emperor Franz Joseph I, Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Sultan Mehmed V of the Ottoman Empire, and then Tsar Ferdinand of Bulgaria. So those are four really pivotal players amongst the Central Powers. All right, ready? All right, here we go. So, this lone picture of this lone woman, who is that? That is Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, which, by the way, is a very, Sophie is actually a very minor member of a very minor royalty, part of the royal family. She is not in line for the throne. No one in her family would have been in line for the throne, but she does marry the Archduke, who is next in line for taking over the throne of Austria-Hungary. We'll talk about her again in a minute. 1914, tensions are very tense. That's a stupid statement. Tensions are very tense. Tensions are high. That rubber band that we talked about is stretched to the limit. Just one more little tug and it's going to break. There are actually countries that are looking for excuses to declare war in Europe, European countries. June 28th, 1914, the Archduke is actually in Sarajevo, which is a part of Serbia, and is touring his empire. He is on some kind of military type maneuvers. He's inspecting the troops, that kind of thing. His wife Sophie is with him. Sophie is such a minor member of the royal family that it was declared that neither she nor any of their children would be in line for the throne. So if the Archduke actually becomes the emperor or the king, whichever, I think it would have been the king. No, been the emperor. And he were to die while sitting on the throne, neither Sophie nor their children would ascend to the throne. So she's kind of ostracized by the rest of her family, the royal family. The Archduke and Sophie again are in Serbia. And he doesn't think highly of the Serbians. He calls them pigs, dogs, foul mouth, foul smelling. Just he doesn't have a lot for the people of Serbia. There's actually a rather elaborate plot to kill the Archduke. Sophie just happens to be an innocent bystander. I think there were 3 different people who were given bombs and handguns, and their job is to assassinate the Archduke. At least one does throw a bomb. The Archduke and Sophie are riding in a convertible, and the bomb bounces off the rolled up top of the convertible, rolls behind the car, underneath a police car and an escort car, blows up. Doesn't kill anybody, but does injure a couple of policemen and some people that were standing nearby. I think that would have been enough for me to go, whoop, we're going home. But not the Archduke. He continues on like a good soldier. Gavrilo Princip does get close enough to the Archduke to shoot him with a pistol, with a handgun. One of those bullets penetrates the Archduke's body, actually goes through his body and hits Sophie in the abdomen. And at that point, the Archduke is heard to say, "Oh, Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Don't die. Our children need you." She, of course, dies. They both die within a matter of minutes. It's not a very prolonged period. So Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke, and his wife, Sophie, the Duchess of Hohenberg, are assassinated by this Serbian nationalist. He's 19 years old. Young kid. And again, a Serbian nationalist. Serbia would be what kind of country? We talked about it a little bit on Friday. Slavic. So, pan-Slavism. We want to get rid of the people from Austria-Hungary. We want to be our own nation. That kind of thing. Well, Austria-Hungary holds Serbia responsible. The entire country is held responsible for the action of one person. And that would be like, if Morgan becomes the president of the United States, she visits Mexico City, and she is killed by Jorge Fernandez, a Mexican nationalist. And the United States then declares war on Mexico for the action of one person. Does that make much sense? No, but that's exactly what Austria-Hungary does. They declare war on the nation of Serbia. Now, was there some speculation? Was there some evidence that Serbia had something to do with it? Yes. For example, Serbia was more interested in the pomp and circumstance of the Archduke's visit than they were security. There were supposed to be, I think, 6 specially trained policemen accompanying the Archduke. There's 1. And so, things are a little lax. Did Serbia conspire to assassinate the Archduke? Who knows? But anyway, Austria-Hungary is convinced. Austria-Hungary has also been looking for an excuse to start a war, and now they have it. And so they start a war. They declare war on Serbia. Well, Austria-Hungary is allied with who? Germany. Who else? Bulgaria. The Ottoman Empire. Okay. The Allies are allied with Serbia. So that's how Great Britain and France get into a war with Germany, Austria-Hungary, because of Serbia. So, the world's at war. And here is the Archduke, by the way. Striking mustache, don't you think? It is. I wish I could grow one like that. Pretty, it's got a little wax in there, don't you think? Yeah. So, Washington Times, served student assassinates Archduke and his Duchess. So the whole story, the Archduke's tunic or coat, you can see the bloodstains on it, and then there's the young fellow that killed him. He actually is sentenced to prison. I think he's sentenced to 20 years, but dies in 1920. No, he dies at the age of 23 of tuberculosis. He contracted while in prison. And then there's the Archduke and Sophie as they lie in state. Don't they look good? You're supposed to say no.
Well, I mean,
They look dead.
they look good to be dead.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna, might as well look good when you're dead. One of the, I don't know if it's interesting. It's not ironic, but it's interesting. Is that morning, just to show you, the little personal side of history. The Archduke cabled his son, sent his son a telegram. Son was in school. He was just finishing up exams, and the father had heard of the results. And he, today we would email, okay, but he sent a telegram to his son congratulating him on, job well done. And then later that day, yeah, I mean, that young man's mom and dad are both dead. In a heartbeat kind of thing. You just never know. So, what starts World War I? That intense nationalism, the colonialism, those military alliances, and the thing that sparks the entire war or the entire event is the assassination of the Archduke. So it lasts for 5 years, from 1914 to 1918. The United States enters late 1917 and actually doesn't appear in Europe until 1918, and does prove enough to push the Allies to victory. Wow. So World War I was the greatest war that was ever fought up to that point. And by greatest, we don't mean it was the best war. We mean it was the deadliest war. Yeah, the costliest war in human history up to that point. New technology, some cases, some old tactics lead to slaughter on a huge scale. In fact, there's so much death and there's so much destruction that World War I is often called the war to end all wars. You also hear it referred to as the Great War. But it was supposed to be the only one of its kind. And of course, we know that's not true. 20 years later, another one starts. That's even worse. Yeah, it was 20 years. It begins as a European conflict. Again, it's Austria-Hungary, Germany, the Ottoman Empire, France, Great Britain, Serbia, Bulgaria. It's a European conflict, but it grows into a world conflict. By the time it's all done, there are 32 countries that are involved in this war. 32 countries that send men to fight, primarily in Europe. It does not spread beyond Europe. And we call it a global conflict, a world war, because of the number of countries that are involved in it. World War II is actually much more of a world war because it circumvented the globe. I mean, it was everywhere. You could not get away from it. And so, that's another story for another day. The United States stays out of it. They maintain this policy of neutrality. We will not get involved in a European war. And they don't. 1914, 1915, 1916, most of 1917. And this is what Woodrow Wilson had promised the American people. And there's an idea in America that, we're going to let people deal with their own stuff. We're not going to be involved. We haven't not been involved in people's stuff since then. We are. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Yeah. Yeah, democratically. Yep. So you see the green, those are allied powers. Some of these are colonies. Canada's still a colony at this point in time. But you see Africa. The only African country not involved is Abyssinia, Ethiopia. Yeah. But every continent except for ice, Antarctica, is involved in this conflict. And that's why it's a world war. It's not because of where it took place, because most of the fighting took place right here. In fact, I think you could say all the fighting took place right there. Unless you consider the Atlantic Ocean a battlefield, and a lot of people would. All right. I like that. So the Allied powers, at the end of the war, you have France, Great Britain, and the United States. Russia drops out. About the time the United States enters, about the time the United States declares war on Germany, Russia pulls out. Vladimir Lenin leads a coup and takes over Russian. It's really the Russian Revolution. The Tsar is kicked out. No, I don't think. Who was it? It might have been. I can't remember. Anyway, and then Germany and Austria-Hungary are the primary Central Powers. Again, the U.S. joins France and Great Britain in 1917. Wilson kept the United States out of the war as long as he could, but things had happened. And there are three things that happened that caused America to enter World War I. Again, that's one of the things that Wilson ran on. I promised not to get us involved in a shooting war, a land war in Europe. And he keeps that promise as long as he can. Unfortunately, he's not able to keep it forever. Because Germany, you ever heard the expression, poke the bear? Okay, Germany kept poking the bear. Yeah. I mean, Germany kept poking the bear. They do more than three things, but there are three things that are worth noting that Germany does against the United States that forces Woodrow Wilson to change his mind. The first happens in 1915. It's the sinking of Lusitania, a British cruise ship that sailed from New York to England and back. It's sunk by a German submarine. Almost 1,200 people are killed, including 128 Americans. It's not a warship, yes.
I believe up until that time, that was the largest loss of civilian life that was caught up in the crosshair. Then it would be the Wilhelm Gustave in 1945, but that was the largest up until that point.
Yep. And it was worldwide news. It was slow worldwide news, but it was worldwide news. It's flying the flag of Great Britain. That's its only quote crime. It's flying that particular flag, and it is sunk. And the newspapers around the world are brutal towards Germany. The Atlanta Constitution, just read that. Many women and children among 1,198 Lusitania dead. It's propaganda. What is the Atlanta Constitution trying to do? Trying to make people mad. I mean, read this one. One dead mother still is clasping in her rigid arms body of her baby. Now, what's the purpose in that? It's going to make people angry. Most of the passengers were, and I love this one, most of the passengers were at luncheon when the death-dealing German missiles entered upon their work of destruction. The death-dealing German missiles. It's great propaganda. And it worked. The opinion of the American people begins to change toward this war because of the actions of Germany. What is this? That is actually the Zimmerman telegram. Telegram. Yeah. The Zimmerman telegram. It's a coded message. It's a secret message from Germany to Mexico, and it obviously was not secret enough. I'm not so sure that Mexico didn't leak it. They may have. Yeah. Well, Great Britain was really good at doing that. Yeah. Germany basically asked Mexico to attack the United States. They also asked Japan to do the same thing on the West Coast, and they do that in 1941. They get around to it. It's just they're a little slow. But in exchange for Mexico's help, Germany says, we'll give you Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. We'll give you back part of what America took from you in the Mexican-American War. Again, it doesn't work. And my question for you is, why would Germany want Mexico to be involved? We're neighbors. Okay.
I think that's got to do something like psychological. Like, let's say I'm living in Texas. You know, I'm like right there.
I mean, it's Texas.
But it gives you the mindset that our enemy is at our back door.
Okay. So are we going to be worried about Germany? No, we're going to have to deal with Mexico, which is, you know, it's there. Yeah, eventually it would. And so Mexico pretty much says no. Not sure why, except that they didn't like Germany any more than the rest of the world did at this point in time. So it doesn't work, but it gets the United States' attention. This is early 1917. And these are not exactly in order, but pretty close. So cartoon, Kaiser, Wilhelm, carving up the United States, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. They go to Mexico. Japan might get California. Yeah. For myself. New York Times, Germany seeks an alliance against the U.S., asks Japan and Mexico to join her. Full text of her proposal is made public. There's only one problem with that headline. What is it? Germany doesn't refer to itself in the feminine gender. It's the fatherland. They refer to themselves as masculine. Yeah. And again, that's worldwide news. In Mexico, one of the reasons they don't do it is because it becomes public knowledge, and the element of surprise is kind of gone. But I don't really think they like Germany any better than anybody else. Oh yeah, filibuster's been around forever. Yeah. What's filibustered?
Filibuster for the extra session, bottom right.
Oh, bottom right. Yeah. third thing, and really it's kind of part of the Lusitania sinking, but that was just one in particular, is unrestricted submarine warfare. Actually, Germany uses that early in the war. They stop for a while, and then they, you know what, we're going back to it. And they say any ship, even if it's from a neutral country, and the Lusitania was not from a neutral country, but there were ships that were sunk that were neutral. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. In other words, they were in British waters or French waters and they were sunk. To the Germans' credit, they took out ads in the newspaper, said, hey, if you're going to sail, we're going to sink you. Did people pay attention to it? Yeah, some did, some didn't. I mean, some had to go to Europe, some had to come to the United States, so they sailed. There was no other way. So the United States has had enough. In 1917, they enter the war as an ally of France and Britain. That's so cute. So Wilson is unable to continue to keep that promise. The pressure on him to ask for a declaration of war is too great, and he gives in to it. He really didn't have a choice. No. He had to. 373 to 50. And there's one woman who voted among those 50 who is the only person to vote against the declaration of war against Germany and Japan. So she votes, she's in the Senate that long, and she votes in both to not issue a declaration of war. And again, this is April 4th, there's a lot that happened in April. Stop and think about it. April 6th, 1917, the U.S. declares war on Germany. The government asked for an army of 2 million men. The American army is like that big. We're not going to war. Why do we need an army? And then they suddenly have to expand that. And I think there's over 1 million that actually serve in the European theater who are part of the American Expeditionary Force. By the time they get there and they get rolling, there's like 200,000 men a month who are going into Europe. So, probably the best video you'll see all year. Ready? 6 minutes of absolute sheer bedlam. No. It's a Hello Home Chef
Move over meal prep and make way for
ad.
and pre-portioned ingredients.
Yeah, it's a good one.
One bullet from a young servant's gun is too strong for World War I. But how one shot through so lethal as to kill over 17 million people? It's time for the histogram of World War I. Let's set the scene. Late 19th century, Germany was booming. There were signs of a storm brewing. Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II had plans to teach his rivals a lesson.
Now Deutschland is hungry to take a high, one third to Cinnamon Empire. Like Britain, I will see Utwan. What a world is about.
It's worth pointing out that the Kaiser was mentally unstable, but unfortunately for the rest of Europe, he was in charge. Germany's neighbors started to take notice.
I'm thinking of putting an army on standby.
I know, because it really is giving me nausea. But now we signed an agreement with Austria.
So tell her when we've got your back, we'll be in the Kaiser attack.
It was It's against this backdrop that Gavrilo Princip, the young Serbian nationalist, shot dead Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne, setting off a terrible chain of events. Are you ready? Let's go. Austria and Germany attacking Serbia for allies of Russia that I mentioned earlier. Russia get ready to advance, and that brings in their pals, France. Germany attack France as quick as they can, adopting a British called the Schlieffen Plan. They go through Belgium, awful decision. As Belgium have friends, then we go to Britain, in come Italy. Now let's join the advance with the first British troops fighting in France. Take cover, or before the ship got on. Good Lord, the trumpets are shells away. Without delay, quick chaps dead. By November 1914, 400 miles of barbed wire and mud stretched from the Alps to Belgium. Commonwealth soldiers arrived from Australia, Africa, and India, but still more troops were needed.
Great Britain, there's much to do. Your time is now. Your country needs you.
Sir, we just had news from Gallipoli.
I used to use the term for resounding victory.
No, sir, 500,000 casualties and a telegram. Send help, please.
Back in the trenches, there was war to fear as chemical weapons began to appear.
Gas, and exit, public demand. Attack bombs better than nothing.
Sir, I'm seeing gas victim
This soldier left it to a nurse.
Behind the front line, volunteer nurses tended to the injured soldiers. Both at home and on the front line, women made tremendous contributions to the war effort.
Hold still, deep breaths, I'll soon be through. It's barbaric what they've done to you.
Oh, thank you, miss. You're a real plum. God, these trenches, no place for a girl.
Neither are they fit for a man, but we're here to help the best we can. And who do you think manufactured your gun? Us girls will see this war as one.
1916 saw terrible losses on the Western Front. The Germans advanced to Verdun and the British went forward at the Somme, but neither battle proved decisive. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the Russians were achieving some successes.
Sir, news from the Russian army.
That veteran's flown a long way. Let me guess, they've been pushed back.
No, actually, they've had a good crack. General Brusilov made good progress. His wide attacks put Fritz under stress. His advance no less than 60 miles.
Perfect news, I like your style.
Oh, hang on. And now his attack's been stalled. German reserves have been called.
Oh, blast.
It would take new tactics and technology to break the deadlock on either front. In 1917, Germany made a fateful calculation by pursuing a ruinous naval strategy.
Since war has gone, long enough, it's time for Deutschland to get down. The Allies will be forced to stay alive. Can't see so good they can't survive.
German U-boats attacked Allied shipping to cut off supply. Critically, they attacked American ships, and in response, the United States declared war on Germany. It would take another year, however, for American troops to actually arrive in Europe. In the meantime, a Russian revolutionary seized his moment.
My Russian brothers, listen in. Let me introduce myself. Vladimir Lenin. I promise to take this country apart. But first, we'll be taking out the Tsar. Good, that was easy. Now everyone's equal. We'll have great land and peace for the people. I think Mother Russia's had enough of this war. I'll meet with the Germans to settle this score.
The meeting took place in November 1917, and Russian land was divided by Germany into independent states, including the Ukraine. With Russia now out of the war, the Germans moved all efforts to the Western Front to plan a colossal effort in the spring of 1918. Ultimately, the offensive failed, and at this pivotal moment, the Americans finally arrived.
Hey, what's up? No photographs, please. We got your memo and... Jeez, things have gotten out of hand. Good thing you called up Uncle Sam. The enemy had better reach for the skies and light it up like a fortune.
By May 1918, 200,000 American troops were arriving per month, and after withstanding the German offensive, new technology and tactics proved decisive for the Allies.
Right, chaps. This is it. We have orders to make the hit. Keep behind the tanks. Use the Lewis gun. A creeping barrage will shatter the hub. Our planes protect from the skies. Then we'll hold the line until support arrives.
Finally, the Allies got some traction, putting the Germans out of action. At 11 a.m. on the 11th of November, the guns fell silent upon German surrender. All in all, a tragic loss. Europe secured, but at what cost? A generation lost. We are forever in debt.
100 years hence, lest we forget.
Stop it. Okay. So, the U.S. enters the war, and shortly after, what happens? We'll find out. What does Georgia contribute to World War I? What is Georgia's contribution to the war effort in World War I. Well, it's actually pretty significant. Roughly 100,000 Georgians serve in the armed forces, Army, Navy, Marines. Some people were flying. The Army Air Corps comes into existence. But Georgia's contribution was not necessarily military. It does make a tremendous military contribution, but much of its contribution is in the form of food and clothing, supplies, material, that sort of thing. Georgia opens up commercial canning plants. They process things like peaches, sweet potatoes, other vegetables. Why? Because those things need to be sent to Europe to feed that tremendous army that has been sent by the United States. What does that do for Georgia? Well, it boosts their economy. Farmers are now able to sell what they grow. People are working in these commercial canning plants. And so it boosts Georgia's economy. There are also meat packing plants. Moultrie, Georgia, Atlanta, Augusta, Savannah. Again, they are preparing and packing food to be sent to Europe for the American Expeditionary Force, and also British troops, French troops as well. And then there are textile mills. Remember, Georgia's still growing cotton. They have begun to build textile mills, and now these mills are part of the war effort. They are creating cloth that is turned into uniforms. And so Georgia's contributions are pretty great, actually. This is actually a plant, a textile mill in Dalton, and there you can see the inside of textile mill, women working. Meat packing plants. I don't think Georgia's packing salmon, but you get the idea. Corned beef, other types of meat are being packed and shipped to Europe, vegetables, all sorts of things. 1917, there's a camp opened in Oglethorpe, Georgia, German POW camp. Now, I don't understand why this was the case, but this was the case. We're going to capture German POWs, and we're going to send them to the United States. How much sense does that make? Yeah. I don't know why that does that. Hospital, Fort McPherson. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 soldiers that are treated from 1917 to 1919. There are training camps in Georgia, Camp Benning, Fort McPherson, Camp Gordon, Camp Hancock. All of those do what to the Georgia economy? They pump resources into the economy. People are put to work. Soldiers spend money. The government spends money. And so all of that helps Georgia's economy. It boosts Georgia's economy. By the time 1919 rolls around, 1918, there are 3,000 Georgians that have been killed in the war, including several from Baldwin County. And if you go down to the courthouse, you can read their names inscribed on the memorial. Not all that died from Baldwin County are on that memorial, however. And I'll tell you who they are in just a moment. We're working to correct that, but haven't been corrected yet. All right. So I think these are actually listed in your notes, but you can see how many camps and training places for training were actually created in Georgia during World War I. Some of those are still here. Some aren't, but some still are. But Fort McPherson closed within the last 20 years or so. Fort Oglethorpe, Fort Screven, Augusta Army Arsenal, which is pretty much Fort Gordon now, Camp Hancock, Camp Gordon, which was not in Augusta, it was actually in Atlanta, Camp Wheeler, Southerfield, Camp Jessup, Camp Greenleaf, Camp Benning. Some of those were kept open. Most of them were actually closed following the war. But Georgia has more training camps than any other state in the Union during World War I. And there's a reason for that. There's a map. You can see the map. You can read the map. It's kind of interesting that most of the camps in Georgia were named after Civil War generals. Well, some of them are.
Didn't the bill pass Congress?
May have. I don't know. But yeah, and if that's the case, Fort Gordon, Fort Benning will be renamed. Yeah. Well, yeah, Fort Gordon's named after John B. Gordon. Fort Benning is actually named after, what was that guy, William Benning, who was a staunch secessionist. Anyway, so Georgia is perfect to train military personnel. It's the perfect place. It's climate, it's a warm climate, and so it allows training year-round. Whereas you're in Michigan or Ohio, a place like that, you have cold winters, you can't continue to train. Railroads, by this time, Georgia railroads have been rebuilt, of course, and you can transport troops and supplies pretty easily. And then you have ports. You're close to ports. Savannah, Brunswick, you can send troops and supplies to Europe pretty quickly, pretty easily. So Georgia is the perfect place for military training. And we're going to see that again when we look at World War II. So all of this impacts Georgia's economy. Fort Oglethorpe, POW camp, they're actually growing their own food. Fort McPherson, I think. Yeah. Hospital there for people that were wounded during the war. Again, a lot of training took place. And there's at least one statue to the World War I soldiers in Georgia. And I can't remember where that is. It's a nice statue, though. Yeah. Life size. Last January, before all this mess hit, we were able to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the dedication of this monument. This is a monument dedicated to 3 African-American soldiers from World War I who died during the war. They are Private Willie Warren, who's from Milledgeville, actually worked at the state hospital, drafted, contracted tuberculosis, and died while in training. And we don't know where he was buried. Alex Threat, also a native of Milledgeville, dies during the flu pandemic of 1918 at Camp Gordon. His remains were shipped home, and he's buried in Memory Hill Cemetery today. And then Gus Austin was actually deployed, was a member of the American Expeditionary Force, one of the Buffalo Soldiers. He's killed in action during the Battle of the Argonne Forest. Yep, in September of 1918. Originally buried in France, he was disinterred and reburied in Arlington National Cemetery. These are the 3 guys that aren't on the Baldwin County Memorial. And again, that's something we're working to correct. They should be there, of course. So the war ends. It's the first really modern war. You have tanks, you have airplanes, submarines, you have chemical warfare. All are things that make death and destruction much more widespread. The death toll is estimated at 10 to 20 million, roughly. The Allies, of course, are victorious. Germany signs an armistice on November 11th, 1918. That's why we celebrate Veterans Day on November 11th. And the treaty is signed ending the war called the Treaty of Versailles. And it is extremely harsh on Germany, and we're going to see it again. The United States does not sign it. Instead, they opt to negotiate peace individually with the countries that were involved. And that's because it's so harsh. One of the reasons they don't want to sign it is because of the League of Nations as well. So, there you go. Did you not read your email? No. You did not read your email? Go back and read your email. You get the first couple of pages, too. You got to read your email when you're not here, London.
There were a lot of laws, but he knew the UN.